In this demo, I demonstrate 3 different ways you can approach painting hands. So this first one that I do basically the traditional, like, make your line art pretty nice so you can actually see what you're painting and then go ahead and add color. You'll notice that since this pose is not something I would typically see or like draw, I do start out with like the stick figure hands that I talked about in the tutorial, and then I moved on and erased all the lines inside and proceeded to define the fingers by itself, just because I'm more familiar and more experienced in drawing fingers. So if you're not comfortable with that, go ahead, keep the sketch underneath and then delete it after you're done drawing the hands. So in the photo reference, the hand was a little bit lighter and a little bit more peachier. That's why I changed the base tone. But basically, after you fix the base tone, I go ahead and give it a little bit nuances. And so you'll notice how I'm keeping the fingers itself relatively pink. And then the places that are a little farther away from the finger, it's going to be more towards like the ochre color of her skin. And it's also during this time I want to lay down all the brightest highlights, so you get this really nice silhouette. And then you can go ahead and use the wand tool to, select the base shade and then add all the little soft transitions from the pink into not so pinks, or even more towards like the grays. So at this point, I've added most of like the major shadows, such as like where the fingers are like curled in within the hand, but I don't want to add any more because the sun is hitting that skin, and so there is subsurface scattering. And if you don't add the subsurface scattering now, your shadows are going to end up looking a lot more gray than they should be. And so you bust out an overlay / hard light layer, depends on what you like. Experiment a little bit, but just apply this nice red glow on top of it, and then it'll make the skin pop a lot better. Then I finished this piece off by adding some rim glow and also darker shadows, so then you really get that nice pop in contrast between the brightest brights, which is basically almost white but not quite white, and then the shadows. So then the hand gets this really nice silhouette and you look like you're almost glowing even though the hand's not really glowing. So this is a second method you can think about for painting hands, and I usually use this when I'm finding that the pose is too difficult for me to try to draw it out, or if I'm trying to study how light interacts with the structures of the hand, or maybe even if I just, there's too many veins or wrinkles on the reference picture that I'm using and I don't want to paint all of that. And so that's when I would just directly jump into the silhouette. So since that's much easier for me to comprehend in my head, like, oh, this is a circle shape, or this is a blob of color here, versus, oh, I have to draw fingers holding a circle. You get what I mean? Because we are painting hands without any line work to hold the difference between each finger, that means you have to be extra duper careful about keeping your edges super crisp and clean. So that means we are using lasso tool, the wand tool, and locking the layer to ensure that each finger is separate from the other finger. And so you see here that I make sure that the highlight on top of that finger helps to distinguish between each finger, and how all the shadows help sculpt the form of the hand. And I'm not just letting the soft brush do the work, because if you just have all soft brush everywhere, then the hand just looks like a big flat mess, like a pancake or something like that, and we don't want that. We want hands. Alright, so you see how I'm painting veins. I don't actually paint lines, but I'm just painting the highlights and the shadows of those veins, because the veins pop out, and just like any structure, it will cast a shadow. And so instead of drawing the lines where the edge of the vein would be, I am giving the illusion of the vein. So veiny hands are still a part of your hand. You can't just distinguish it, because it won't look natural and it won't look good. And finally, the last way you might think of painting is to do really loose gestural line work. So similar to how Loish paints or how Ross draws paints, you just get the general idea of the movement of the hand, lay it down, and then paint over it, because the whole point is you're gonna basically cover it up with the color, so it doesn't matter whether or not you get all the lines very clean and neat. And this really works if you're more of a spontaneous type of painter, or if you're trying to add a little bit more energy to your work. You can keep those lines, and that can sort of act like a way of measuring, like, oh, your artistic spirit or whatever. Honestly, I just find it's useful when I'm doing a kind of chaotic pose for the hand and I'm not wanting to struggle so much to get it perfectly at the right angle, and I just want to get the energy of it. So I just usually go for the knuckles, capture the energy of the knuckles, and then the fingers will just follow along, and then I don't have to worry so much. So you notice I changed the lighting of the hands a couple of times, and that's because I didn't like it, and also I kind of wanted to create a uniformity within the piece. The other pieces had like really bright contrast lighting, and I thought that if I just did what the reference photo did, which was like a more diffuse lighting, it'd look a little bit out of place. But also I just find that having high contrast lighting looks a lot more magical or like ethereal, because you have that really nice glow that happens when the light hits the hand like that. And so yeah, and I think it also creates like this really nice, you know, negative shape, don't you think? So those were the 3 ways you can consider painting hands. It's not the only 3 ways, but obviously I try to kind of categorize it based on what type of person or artist you are. If you're more structured like me, then you might like to have line art. And then if you're more spontaneous or you're trying to move towards a more painterly look, then you might want to go to just painting straight silhouettes and then do that. And so let's see the final product.